All right, so welcome everyone and good morning. We're thrilled that you're able to join us for today's Open Education Week webinar. We are pleased to host Ed Beck and Sarah Portway from SUNY Oneonta, who will share about ePortfolios using open source publishing platforms. Ed is an instructional designer and open educational resources co-lead, and Dr. Portway is an assistant professor in the fashion and textiles program. So I will turn it over to them and get right into the content. Thanks so much.
Great. So I guess by way of introducing myself just a little bit further and sort of why I'm presenting here today, I actually include portfolio work for many years in my courses. I came with a lot of teaching experience to Oneonta, and portfolios are nothing new to fashion. And so I do tend to include a lot of high impact practices according to the AAC&U definitions as well. So ePortfolios is part of that. And also I'm here today to talk about a writing intensive course that I offer. And I'll give sort of the micro perspective of implementation of one of these portfolio assignments, while Ed is far more qualified to talk about the bigger picture.
So I'm Ed Beck. I am an instructional designer at SUNY Oneonta. And one of the things that I'm trying to bring to this particular presentation is both the institutional outlook of how we can encourage ePortfolios. And also I'm trying to bring a little bit of the system perspective of what we've been doing to encourage all kinds of open pedagogy and all kinds of sharing online. I served as part of that open pedagogy subcommittee, that task force that was part of the FACT2, and was one of the things we looked at was what kind of infrastructure do we need in order to enable faculty to do these sorts of things. After that FACT2 subcommittee from the system, we wrote a grant at Oneonta that started what we call SUNY Create, which invites students to build things online, whether that's a portfolio, a class hub, whatever it may be. And then over time, this has grown so that when, Dr. Sarah Portway steps up and says, hey, I was thinking about using ePortfolio. Is that anything that we could do here? We had systems in place already to try to make it a little bit less of a lift for her and less of a feeling like she was, inventing it herself as she went. So a little bit about us. At SUNY Oneonta, we're a small campus. We're one of the comprehensive institutions from the SUNY system. It means that we have, about 6,500 students, mostly undergrad. We do have a couple master's programs, usually in the education or some kind of licensing program. Our nutrition program is large at SUNY Oneonta, but our primary focus is our undergraduate students. And we have, an increasing diversity on campus that we are trying to encourage and foster and support these students. So we have changing demographics that we're serving.
So some of the guiding principles of our implementation, as I said, Ed was there to support me along the way in fall 2020 when I was teaching this course, again, for the first time under COVID. And I realized I have not shared the handout that I have for you yet. If you would like to see some of this stuff, I've actually included the whole brief for you. Move the chat over there, or maybe Ed can share that in the chat. It's not letting me do it right now. So, so some of the guiding principles when we went into the fall 2020 semester, I knew that I had to switch my portfolios assignment to being online for the first time. Traditionally in fashion, we're very tactile folks. That's probably not a big surprise to many of you, right? We like to touch things. And so having a physical book was pretty standard for a typical job interview. And so I had done it on paper for many, many years. But fall 2020 happened. And not only did my students get online, and I had no way of collecting those books anymore unless I got them to pay for expensive postage, and then asked them to expose themselves to a post office, which felt like a little bit difficult to do. So instead, we had to switch online. And so Ed was there to help me throughout that. So some of the guiding principles that I had as I reapproached this new sort of format was making sure that we had private and public touch points with the students. So privately, I did have a homework assignment that asked them to reflect on their performance throughout the semester. As I said previously, it was a writing intensive course. So they had several writing assignments over the semester. You can see I've listed them there in the project brief. So they had a who wore it best, a news, a feature, catwalk, trend report, and shopping page. So they had to put all of that in an online space in a beautiful way that would help them get a job. So that was the public side. So we had this public-private moment where they could reflect on their performance, apply feedback, improve, and also help prepare them for their career. Oops. So the workflow looked like this. I gave very detailed feedback on every assignment, probably more than they even wanted. So lots of feedback on every assignment, right down to the sentence level, helping them with things like grammar and sentence mechanics. Where is it appropriate to use slang because it is fashion journalism, and where should we, watch for that? Then they would submit their homework, a private reflection after they applied all of the edits. Some of the takeaways that I saw in that homework was they realized they had actually been making the same errors over and over again throughout the semester. So, the difference between there, and there, something like that, they noticed, oh, I could have got that earlier. And so that was what I collected privately. Then they made their public facing website. The requirements were pretty bare minimum this time because it was my first time through it too. And so I didn't want to ask my students to do something that I couldn't do yet. So we had an About Me page. They had a tab on their websites that had all of these different assignments in there. And then if they wanted to, I was more than willing to give them some feedback. I love a good feedback session on a more complete portfolio with other work, perhaps from other classes, in other disciplines. And I have the benefit of teaching 6 courses on campus. So I was able to say, no, your project for econ, totally put that in there because it was great. And I had that memory and relationship with my students to encourage them to do that. So that was the basic workflow and kind of way we tackled that. And here are some examples of what a portfolio looks like using this open education software. So some of the significance of these portfolio assignments, it's a lot about skill building those analytic skills, being able to reflect on their own performance. Some of the research on ePortfolios has pointed to them being a little more authentic and equitable. Students get a lot of choice in the way they present themselves, so it tends to be a little bit less prescriptive than some of the other assignments I give. And so it gave them a little bit more flexibility and kind of helped level the playing field when they went out into the career world because they had that portfolio already set to go. I'm all about working smarter, not harder. So this was also very adaptable. Ed really helped show us the back end of this software to show us how we could continue to build those portfolios after they left our class. So this became a pretty significant assignment, and I'll tell you a little bit about how our students perceived this assignment a little later on. So we have a few different types of portfolios based on the research of Beckers et al. Ours kind of hit all of these marks. It was about professional development. It was about reflection. They were building this dossier or a collection of work. And also they were getting trained throughout the process to how to build that portfolio. We are definitely getting to that, Chrissy. Some of the rationale, we were looking for self-directed learning. We were looking for enhancing. We knew that students were more motivated to do online portfolios than paper. We also knew we needed some clear outcomes. And I was actually surprised when I delved into the literature on this, that there were disciplines using ePortfolios that I didn't expect, like medicine, for example. I had no idea. So the reason I say that is to encourage you to think really holistically about, like, could a portfolio fit in this course, even though maybe it's not one of those creative disciplines like fashion or art that we would usually associate with these types of portfolios. So getting to some of the software and back end stuff, Ed, take it away.
Yeah, so this is the why are we presenting at Open Education Week about ePortfolios? SUNY Oneonta has a growing OER initiative. And one of the things that we explored early on was the open source publishing platforms that we could create our own OER with. And this was a shift for us that we started with the open publishing platforms, those open source platforms that we could just run with, like Pressbooks, like WordPress, like MediaWiki. And we started to say, okay, are there other things that we wish we were doing that we could do with the same infrastructure? I said earlier, we wrote that grant. We started this open source creation project at SUNY Oneonta. And we went through a couple different iterations of this as we started to think about it. Can we put the timeline up?
Yeah, sorry, it's clicking slow here.
Okay, so all the way back in the spring of 2019, we started the initial grant development for SUNY Create. And then we piloted two kind of different approaches to using this open source technology to create portfolios. Both times, we used WordPress-based solutions. But the first time, we definitely incorporated a lot more digital literacy skills into the project, where the second time we did it, and this is one of the lessons learned as we continue to iterate on this idea, is we really focused on making it simple for the students to get started, giving the students a template to get started, and making that as quick as possible so they can feel that success of having published something as quick as we could. Again, we started it with grant funds, but I'm really proud of the fact that SUNY OER Services has picked up this initiative that we started, SUNY Create, and it's being integrated into SUNY OER Services, so we don't have to worry about it being grant funded anymore, and that we're working out a shared pricing model that we can share the work we've been doing across all of our campuses. So in year one, we went with what we call a straight domains of one's own workflow. We really tried to give students complete control of a website and then teach them about that step by step as they went. The first participating classes were from our educational technology master's program. And so we thought, how cool is it if we could install them, teach them how to install a Moodle, a WordPress, their own Pressbooks. We can teach them a little bit about the way the internet works, make them less scared of, words like IP address and DNS. And we focused on tools. I'm very proud of the work that we did in year one, and I would never go back and undo that. But what we learned from that year one is that we needed to have a gentler entry point into the world of publishing online. And so in year two, our focus was completely on how to stop that decision overload for students. How do we get students pushed into a template? In year one, we were teaching students how to install plugins, themes. Here's how you vet a theme. Here's why you vet a plugin. How do we say, here are 5 really good ones, and why don't you just pick from that instead of the 500 that are in the WordPress open category? So we were really trying to just simplify. And that's where we came upon Commons in a Box Open Lab. And now I'm going to get very red here because I'm about to try to explain to you what Commons in a Box Open Lab is in front of Charlie Edwards, the director of Commons in a Box Open Lab. Thanks for coming, Charlie. So later on, when there are questions, I'm going to kick them to somebody more knowledgeable on the call. But here's what Commons in a Box Open Labs means for me. WordPress already had features in it that's called multi-site. A WordPress multi-site allows us to have multiple websites all coming from the same hub, where an administrator can manage all the themes, the plugins, all those settings, so the individual users don't have to know how to do that. That's a great feature of WordPress, and it comes out of the box with WordPress. But what Comes in the Box Open Lab did very smartly is they said, we don't need to invent a brand new platform to do ePortfolios and have our own open source platform. What we should instead do is pick a very well-developed open source project and tweak the settings that are already available to it in the different plugins and things. So they added a social component to WordPress. So now WordPress multi-site, every user has their own profile page. They can join interest groups. Then they introduce communication and user management. It's not just that I, as an admin, can place a user into groups. They created ways where I can request to be part of this class, or as a teacher, I can invite all my students at once to participate in my community hub. All of this, since it's CUNY who's doing this work, they've made it for education. They've organized it in ways that an educator could really use. So WordPress lets us make all these hubs of sites. They said, let's categorize those sites into courses, projects, organizations, and portfolios. And then let's be able to push out a template to help each of those different types of sites get started really quickly. Again, just really smart, building on what WordPress already had available, and then making small changes time over time to make it more what an education institution could want. And finally, this is my favorite part of this, they introduced privacy controls as well. And so, when Dr. Portway comes up and says, I want my students to start creating in the open, one of the things that would always come up at our past open pedagogy groups was, well, what about FERPA? What can we make students do in the open versus what can we ask them to do in the open? And so a student in Dr. Portway's class can create a website and keep it private to just them and their professor, or share it with the community, or make it accessible on the World Wide Web. They have those controls built in because we're using a tool created for education. So when you ask me what tool we're using, the simplest answer is we're using WordPress. But the more complicated answer is we're using an entire system that has been designed for education to modify WordPress for higher ed.
So to come back to this implementation level, what I'm really interested in and what my students are very, very interested in right now is career preparation and how prepared they feel to enter the job market. In this case, I'm preparing them to go on the job market, so that first step, but some of the self-reflection skills will last a lifetime and they'll be able to take them away. So we were interested in what is career readiness. And so we found the National Association of Colleges and Employers website. We thought that was a really wonderful resource that broke it down into these different core competencies that they were looking for to as part of a career preparedness or career readiness framework or model. And we'll come back to this in a minute. But what I did—
Can I just say something about that slide, Sarah?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
This is another thing, because it was a shift for the way we were thinking about open on campus. And I don't mean to think of this as an insult to the way I was thinking in the past, but the question for us was no longer, how do I get more open activities happening on my campus, but how do I prepare students to be thinking in this way, to be ready to go out and have something they can take with them. And because we're using these open tools, WordPress is very portable. The students can bring them with them after. And again, this is part of the reason why we're making these open decisions about something that would not necessarily jump out to you as being, an open education topic. The portfolio being built in an open system was strategic, but it's not the goal. The goal is great experience for students. The goal is this career readiness. And that was a mindset shift for me.
That's a great point. I totally forgot about that. Thank you. Yeah. So this is our rough research timeline. This is how we got to be presenting this type of work. So in fall 2020, that was when I implemented the assignment in fashion journalism. In July 2021, Ed and I had this idea, or Mr. Beck had this idea. We're using our formal addresses today. So we had this idea, well, Ed sent me the call for the AAC&U conference, and I noticed, and it was for a special ePortfolio session, and he sent it to me thinking, oh, look, they think what we're doing is cool. And I thought he was like, we should apply. And so my misunderstanding resulted in a submitted abstract, which we did present back in January. So that was when we started, oh, we better interview and measure that career readiness. How did students perceive this assignment? What was the result? Did they use it? Did they actually get to take that with them into the job market? Was it open enough? And so we used grounded theory, pretty standard type of research method for assessing interviews. I went through, the normal coding process using Atlas TI. So these were some of the questions that we asked, and they are in detail on your handout. So I'll go through these pretty quick, but to measure professionalism, we asked about, did they treat it differently than other assignments? When we were wondering about communication, we were wondering if they were going to use this in the future. And a lot of them told us they already had, which was great. We also found, we were also wondering if this helped them adapt to new technologies, if it made them more open. And we were wondering about career development, of course. Did this help them identify strengths and weaknesses in their skill set once they saw it all together? And, we were also interested in, did this help them prepare for their career? So here were our results from our interviews. So we were able to interview 7 people, which is pretty good considering this was a year after the course had been offered, and many of our students had graduated because it was an upper division course. So we were pretty happy with that number. And there were only 20 students in the course. So this is actually a pretty good representative sample of the students that completed this work. So some of them, 4 of them said they had exerted more effort. And in particular, they were saying they knew they could use it down the road. So that inspired them to work a little bit harder on it, and that they wanted it to be seen by employers. We also said that, they also said that, they knew their employers were going to look them up on social media. This gave them a nice, clean digital footprint. It was the first result on Google that popped up. They were really happy with that. We also found that students were a little intimidated by the software at first, but over time, they became a little more comfortable. So many of the barriers to this assignment were psychological, right? Like the fear of just getting started. And once they overcame that, many of them were like, oh, this only took me a couple of hours. This was not that bad.
And remember, when we did this was in 2020. The first COVID semester, it was fully online, and I did push into the class and give them an overview of how to use WordPress, and that was really good. But one of the things we forgot, and we should have just known it, intuitively, is when you're on a Zoom call like this, it's not so easy to do like a step-by-step walkthrough, because you only have one screen, you're only on one little laptop screen, you can't work on the WordPress site and see the presentation at the same time. So a lot of our comments were similar to that, but it really influenced how we want to do it the next time.
Yeah, and that comes into our best practices. We learned we really need to make sure they either have multiple monitors, which is an equity and access issue, or bringing them to the computer lab where they can follow along on their computer. So we're doing that in April, and I'm very excited. I'm running the course again right now. So then they said, they're adapting it as they go. They were able to look at everything, and they knew that it could be shown to employers. And 5 of them had actually already used it in their job search, one of which we're so proud of. She landed her dream job at Macy's as a merchandiser using her portfolio. Ed, I haven't even told you about this, but I just have a student who just got a job as a fashion journalist using this portfolio too. We're so excited. So she's moving to California. She couldn't be happier.
I mean, we were asking the question in the interview, would you consider using this? because we wanted to get their perceptions on that, whether they thought it was of a high enough quality to show in a job interview. And I was just stunned with how many said, oh yeah, I already have. And it really lets me think about how a small project, because this isn't a portfolio that it's embedded across the entire curriculum. This is a portfolio that was done in one single class, but it still can be a great learning experience for these students.
And I think that also is one of the beauties of us both talking about this. We both came at it from different perspectives. I knew they were going to use it right away. And Ed was sort of more thinking about it like this open network thing where I was like, job, job, job. So I think that really is kind of the beauty of this. We came at it from different perspectives and made a great learning experience. So here are the course evaluations. Yes, I'm brazenly showing exactly the raw data because many of you are probably sitting there thinking like, of course they had positive reactions. 7 students responded to an email from a professor way later. So obviously they liked me a little, so we did have that sample bias where the students were pretty agreeable with me. I have a good relationship with my students, but you can see that, even students that were responding anonymously also, and I had a good response rate, 19 of 25%, which is great for online surveys. We noticed that they really did enhance their motivation to learn. So we used this as another data point to make sure that we included this assignment in the future. So here's some examples of the products my students created. So proud. And here's an example of one of the Who Wore It Best assignments here on the right side. Zendaya won, surprise, surprise. She wins everything with my students right now. So one of the things that we learned, some of the best practices that we want to make sure we share with you before, you go off into the world and think about creating one of these assignments in a multitude of disciplines. When you're thinking about course design, you really should be producing work throughout the course that they can put in their portfolio. It is really difficult to ask for essays and then at the end of the semester, ask for other type of work that presents really well in an assignment. So you do need to have that preparation piece and build that into your course design long before the semester starts so that you are producing a body of work, several artifacts to put in this portfolio. And that means a lot of balancing and pace of workload. So I found myself giving students assignments like the shopping page early on where they didn't need as much background to complete that versus maybe something like the feature article, which requires knowing about journalistic conventions and templates and formatting. So it was a lot of thought that went into pacing those assignments well. And also for myself, because I had to give a lot of feedback and you need a quick turnaround time or they're not going to be able to apply that feedback to the next assignment. So that's kind of a challenge from the faculty perspective in including this body of work piece. So that's something to watch out for. If you have a really heavy semester, it might be difficult to give that type of feedback. So it really depends on what your teaching load is. But the importance was to have that opportunity for reflection and practice and really helping students recognize that looking at that feedback regularly will help them have that continuous creative editing process.
Yeah, can you go back to that slide? No, Sarah never uses the words growth mindset. But it's one of the things that I admire about her teaching philosophy and the way she structured this assignment. And so I just want to brag about her a little bit longer to be able to say things like, when the students first did their assignments, they were submitted through Blackboard. They were submitted through our gated LMS. She gave feedback on there, detailed feedback. She's known on campus for the elaborative feedback she gives students, and then encourages students to take that feedback and continue to work on it through the semester so that when they upload it to that portfolio as that final step, it's not just what they submitted on Blackboard the first time, but that they've grown throughout the entire semester to be something that they're really proud of. And I think that's one of the key things that makes this assignment work. The way that she has drawn it up. It's not just that portfolios are magic and implementing one to a website at the end of class is going to magically make students learn better, but she has bought into it, created those authentic assignments, gives comments on them, invites that improvement over time. And then at the end, we have this showcase that they can go out and show the world. And that's really important, is it's not just a website. It's an entire transformation in the way she's teaching. And from the outside, I think I can see that very clearly as an instructional designer working with her. And sometimes I don't think she knows how good she is from the inside, because that's just the way she always operates. But what we're looking at here is a really great faculty member.
Oh, okay. I'll try and hide my blushing. Thanks, Ed. That was really, really nice. I could sing Ed's praises too, but I will keep on going with this for now and find a place to interject, because I couldn't have done it without Ed. In part because when designing this final assignment, the students were lacking confidence and had anxiety around the assignment, but so did I. And Ed was really helpful having that step-by-step. So coming back to these best practices, you need an Ed on your team. He was so helpful with the technology piece and really helped us overcome that. As I said, one thing to expect is that your students are going to have that psychological piece. They don't want to show their work publicly. They're not feeling very confident, which is where those privacy controls come in with Open Lab being so great. Because if my students were just overwhelmed with the idea of anybody being able to look at this, they were able to shut that down and make it private, only I could see it. So there was some anxiety related to getting started. And in large part, that did have to do with our kind of thinking that, everyone has an elaborate monitor set up like the two of us do, but we learned pretty quickly that that's not the truth. And many of them are working on like a little Mac screen, trying to follow Ed and all of his clicking around. And, so I was frantically taking notes. We learned a lot from trying to train. So we also found that supporting those connections between experiences and between the different assignments, having that growth mindset that Ed talked about, was really helpful, and also showing them that they could include some other work in there.
When we were doing our interviews, I remember a lot of the students we asked, oh, did you ever think about putting a link to your LinkedIn? Would you ever connect it to your Instagram? Remembering that these are fashion students, and a lot of them have like an Instagram that they're using for looks that they like, that Instagram might be part of their professional online presence as well as their social online presence. That's why we're mentioning it here. And a lot of them are going, I didn't think about that, but I should have. And so we're learning from that, and say, in a way, these interviews that we did were kind of an intervention in itself. And we're saying, oh, okay, we need to bring this up in the class next time. Make sure they think about these things. Make sure that we explicitly show them examples that do incorporate, a wider World Wide Web, so they can see it and really think about how the next time is going to be better, and the next time is going to be better in that kind of action research cycle.
It's true. Teachers gonna teach, right? And I couldn't resist during interviews saying things like, oh, you should include that great promotion project for Puma you did, or whatever it was. So they were like, oh yeah, I totally should. We did end up accidentally teaching during these interviews too. And Ed was really helpful in explaining the mechanics, on the fly. So we found some students were wondering about different platforms. Not all of them liked WordPress. It seemed very difficult to them, but what they found out was that it was a little more flexible than things like Wix, which are easier to start up, but don't have the adaptability. And a lot of the internet is run on WordPress. And so, it's a good skill. The skills are transferable. Starting hard and going easy is more simple than starting easy and going hard once you go into the job market. And I really found a lot of value in the homework assignment with the reflection, having that private moment with them to complement the public was very important to me. And then the technology piece. Ed, maybe you want to talk on this.
Absolutely.
I feel like I've been yip-yapping away.
Yeah, so we are going to, when we do this again, because she's currently teaching this class again, just like last time, I'm going to push into the class and give them a walkthrough of WordPress. And our goal for that first meeting is to let them experience success right away, because we heard from the students in our interviews, oh, I was anxious at first. Oh, I was really scared of the technology. But once I got in, it wasn't bad at all. but once I got in it, I got used to it. So we want to make sure that they have that positive first step, that hello world post where they can go in and say, yes, I have the confidence to use these tools. And we wanted to definitely go in and have that kind of step-by-step, here, click with me, here's how you do it. Do that kind of early in the class to get them started. But then we also found there needed to be time for them to play. Oh, you know what? I started out with this, first theme, but you know what? I'm gonna change this up later on, or I'm gonna change how I'm organizing things. So as much as we want to make starting easy for them and give them that step-by-step, kind of work through, we also wanted to just encourage communication, play. We don't want to make these cookie cutter. We just want them easy to get started. And so we're continuing to build on our kind of just in time training videos and resources. I had an intern last year whose entire assignment was to make some help pages for us that we're going to continue to expand on for the students to use, and just give people a place for technical support. And I use the word place here abstractly, because it could be a Teams chat where I'm available and accessible and they could ask a question, or it could be a forum in Blackboard, but we want a place where the students can go to ask for help and get some reinforcement and feedback.
Yeah, and the face really helps. My students are really resistant to go to IT for support until they know, oh, Ed, the cargo shorts guy, because we had a conversation about whether cargo shorts were cool or not. And so
okay,
they
so
remember.
just Dr. Portway starts every single one of her classes looking at a current fashion catwalk. And these models are walking around looking like it's 1998 with cargo shorts on, cargo pockets in their pants. So I just had to ask if that was cool again.
Yeah, it's come and gone now. So
it's gone already. Dave,
we're done.
We're behind. We're behind again.
Yeah, it's all about the micro mini now. The more leg, the better. And low rise is back. I'm sorry, everybody. I tried to stop it, but I couldn't. I asked them not to do it, and they did anyway. So.
Do you have any questions or comments for us? I'm going to read some of these longer posts.
Yeah, thank you, Ed. There's I was going to
summarize.
say there's a comment and some question there from Robin, and folks can unmute if you would prefer to engage that way as well. So we welcome your feedback.
I'm reading Rob. Oh, I'm sorry.
Robin's asking about other types of public assignments, easing them into online availability, like editing a wiki, if that would be helpful for them. I think that learning to manipulate any technology helps give you a fluency to edit others, even if it's not the exact same technology. And I think that part of what we're asking students to do is putting on personas and practicing writing in a different way for a different audience. And I think that as long as the audience is similar or the same, that the skills could be very transferable. But, a technical writing, when I think of wiki, I often think it's like a technical writing or writing for an audience that doesn't know the topic area, where on the other hand, a portfolio is writing to your peers inside your community, and that's a different skill. And so that might, there might not be as much transferable in between ePortfolios and that as you possibly could.
Mm-hmm. And picking up on that mental health piece too, I absolutely spotted that. And actually that's what we called the bullet point at first, was like mental health. Mental health, I'm sure we're all experiencing like difficulty focusing. We'll have a student come to us after and be like, I'm sorry, I totally missed that entire assignment brief because I was just not here mentally. And so I don't exactly know that, like, I'm not a psychologist. I don't exactly know how to overcome that. So this semester, what we're going to try is meeting all together in the lab. So we have that sense of community, give them the face and place to go for support. With Ed, I'm going to set up a special Teams channel again, just so that they can communicate with Ed, add him to our class team, because I pretty much teach in dual modality right now. A lot of my students tune in online if they're feeling a little sick that day. So, we're going to meet all together, and then I'm actually going to have us come back again a couple of weeks later with no, hardcore kind of demo, but the opportunity to sort of spot treat, like, oh, you were having problems uploading a PDF. Like, here's how you do that. Or, oh, we noticed like the color palettes and all of these portfolios are a little disjointed. Like, here's a resource for you to find a color palette. And here's how you use the eyedropper tool to help you get that palette all through. So some of those types of little spot treatment, kind of just in time learning, things you find out that they didn't get the first time, rather than catching them when I grade their final assignments. I just want to give everybody A's. It's a lot easier for me. So, and I get a lot fewer emails. So we're going to give them another crack at it this time, another chance just to play with support. Ed'll be there, I'll be there, and my teaching assistant will also be there to help kind of run around and help with that mental health piece, just get them over that hurdle and hopefully make it fun. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
There are a few more questions in the chat, but I saw that Jody's hand is up, so give Jody a moment.
Hi, I'm Jody Rosen. I'm from City Tech. I'm one of the co-directors of the Open Lab there. And I was just wondering, I think it's so great, Sarah and Ed, thanks so much for your presentation, that you reached back out to former students and that they were still using it a year later. And I guess the thing that I'm wondering about, thinking about the community and that kind of buy-in that students have, is what happens when they graduate. Are they still able to use that same site? Are they still able to log into it? Did they want to port it over somewhere that they had their own URL, or just kind of how you handle that? Because I think one of the things that this kind of setup can do is really keep alumni connected to the school.
Yeah, so what Jody was saying is first of all, Open Lab is based on the work that she and her colleagues at City Tech have done, and they have packaged this to make it easy for other open source adopters. So first of all, we're a hugely indebted to the work they've done because they're the pioneers in this. And then the actual question was about what is our policy for students after they graduate? And what we are thinking is that students will be able to edit and manipulate this while they are students at SUNY Oneonta, but then we can use the portability of the fact that it's WordPress to take it with them. We use Reclaim hosting for our hosting needs. And one of the things that they can do is export a WordPress archive file and bring it to another host. They could bring it to anyone. They could bring it to GoDaddy. They could bring it to HostGator. There's a whole lot of people that can host WordPress websites. We like Reclaim hosting because they're set up for education from the beginning. And they have a migration deal for our students who are coming off of using SUNY Create, that they will help them migrate their sites for free if they would start to pay for it themselves and maintain their websites. And I think at a pretty reasonable rate, their rate is $30 for hosting per year, which is pretty good compared to some of their competitors for what I think is better service. So we're thinking about how we can encourage them to take it with them, not that we're going to give them editing in perpetuity of their original Open Lab WordPress website.
Thanks.
So it looks like there's a technical question from Robert. What do you do after you download the plugin? Is there a specific folder to open?
Yeah, and Dave is saying in the chat that he's abandoned GoDaddy. I've abandoned GoDaddy and HostGator. I'm all Reclaim. I got the tattoo. I'm not switching again. I think that they're the best at what they do because they're a hosting company focused in the education space. I think that question about what folder or how to install the plugin for Commons in a Box is also related to Dave's much longer question about WordPress and security. One of the things that Commons in a Box Open Lab do for us as a service is they keep a version of all the plugins that make this work that we can update on a regular university calendar schedule. And so when I install the plugin Commons in a Box, what it actually does is it installs all the helper plugins that are needed to make it work. It helps configure my front page so I don't have to know how to do it myself. It kind of gives us that default landing page that you'll see at, oneonta.sunycreate.cloud or geneseo.sunycreate.cloud. We have Amanda who's going to be speaking in a few minutes about her site. And we found that with WordPress, you hear a lot about WordPress vulnerabilities, but what the most important thing is keeping your site up to date and patched with the most recent version. And I think that both our host, Reclaim Hosting, and the work that City Tech and other people have done to package Commons in a box to make it easy to keep up to date and manage on a university schedule, both helps us make sure that we're delivering a secure experience for our students.
Thank you. Are there any final questions or comments before we wrap up?
Feels dirty, doesn't it, Dave?
So formal.
Mr. Beck.
Well, I just want to thank again Ed and Sarah for their presentation today and for sharing this great work. And the feedback from students is always really exciting to me, just to see the impact and the impact beyond your class, right? And that's really what all of these open projects are all about, is that ability to extend beyond their class experience. And I love that.
Well, maybe you'll have us back next year because we're interviewing them
Right.
again after this semester. So maybe we'll have some reports on progress and new lessons learned the hard way.
I think that would be great. Absolutely. And yeah, right. And your transparency and all of that is so important too. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So our next session is at 11. It's on a first year blogging project, and we are keeping this room open. So you're welcome to stay here if you want, or pop out, grab some coffee, come back in, whatever it may be. It is our last presentation for today. So we just have these 2 morning ones, and then we have 2 morning sessions tomorrow as well. I'll put the links in the chat again for you. You can fill out registration for those events and get the Zoom link. It's the same Zoom link for the entire week. So if you have that bookmarked, come on back in at 10 and 11 tomorrow as well. And we have our survey just to help us with planning for each year. We've been doing this for a number of years now, and Open Education Week is always exciting to see what kind of great projects are happening across our SUNY system. So thanks again to everyone. I'll stop the recording and hang out here until our next session. Take care.